All right. It looks like we've got pretty much the majority of people on here. So we'll kind of get started. My name is Nathan Jager, Marketing Manager here at EchoStor. Wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We are recording this session. We'll send out an email with the session tomorrow for you guys to share with your teams. And don't hesitate to ask questions in the Q&A in the chat. I'll be monitoring that to provide to Matt and Daniel, and they can kind of answer questions at the end. And if they see something in the middle, maybe they'll pop in and answer it right away. So without further ado, I'll introduce who we have on the call today from EchoStor. We have Daniel Clydesdale-Cotter, pre-sales architect, heavily focused on VMware and DevOps, and then we have Matt Hogue, who is our VMware practice lead. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Matt.
Thank you, Nathan. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you all for taking the time to join today. I hope you all are, you, yourselves, your family, your friends are all healthy during this time that we're facing right now. As I mentioned, I'm Matt Hogue. I'm the VMware practice lead. I've been here with EchoStor for around 10 or so years at this point. And prior to that, I spent some time with EMC prior to the Dell acquisition. And really spending my time with the VMware technologies throughout my career. The actual partnership with EchoStor was started in 2005, and between EchoStor and VMware started in 2005. And that's around when I started working with them as well. Also on the line with me today is Daniel Clydesdale-Cotter. If you want to introduce yourself, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. As Matt said, my name is Daniel Clydesdale-Cotter. I joined EchoStor about a year and a half ago. I came from a finance customer, and in my most recent role there, I ran a DevOps organization where we were heavily focused on providing automated platforms for our development organization. And I've brought some of that knowledge over to EchoStor, and hopefully we can share some of that with our customers.
Thank you, Daniel. So as I mentioned, our partnership with VMware really began at the inception of EchoStor back in 2005, where we had helped many of our customers consolidate their physical workloads into virtual workloads, helping to improve the overall efficiency of their IT infrastructure. Over the years, we've transformed along with the industry into now helping customers embark on a digital transformation journey, leveraging multi-cloud architecture that supports a variety of infrastructure and application services and infrastructure components. We were able to deliver on that through our partnerships with folks like Dell EMC, NetApp, Rubrik, ServiceNow, and Cisco, several other technologies, including VMware. So we've got a ton of different technologies at our disposal to help customers as they embark on this journey. As you take a look at the slide here, it shows the full life cycle, really of the application development process. So, and these are all different technologies that we partner with. So from an enterprise service management standpoint, we have a partnership with ServiceNow to help with requests and ticketing and tracking that full life cycle. And then as we move down the stack into the platform and DevOps area, this is really focused on our partnership with VMware, one of the core reasons why we're having this discussion today. But then we also have partnerships with other folks like AWS and Azure and Red Hat to help enable customers with all different application types and requirements. And then moving down to the core infrastructure, so very traditionally, many folks still do have on-premises data centers, and they're linking those into cloud infrastructure using VMware technologies or others, including things like HCX, for example. And so we have very strong expertise in each of those different technologies. Daniel, anything you want to
add? No, I think you covered it there. I think just looking at this picture, this is somewhat of a map towards a digital transformation that many customers I think are going through right now.
Thank you. So from an agenda standpoint, this is a very VMware-centric discussion. The plan is to go through that VMware vision that they've really been going forth with for the last 7 or so years at this point, with a heavy focus on the multi-cloud and modern applications platform group, or the application modernization strategy of VMware. That's a core piece of the discussion today. We will hit on some of the intrinsic security and end user computing pieces toward the end of the presentation. So if you just look at the VMware vision, and again, this has been the vision for several years at this point, and really both EchoStor and VMware are trying to help our customers access any application from any device at any time, and provide the flexibility to run those applications in several different ways, whether it's SaaS-based, public cloud-based, or on-premises, and provide the full connectivity between each of these different components. We want to make sure that our customers have the flexibility to run any of these applications anywhere. So from a VMware standpoint, they really accomplished this through 5 different franchises, or I like to call them their pillars of focus. So if we look at the application modernization piece, really this is centered around VMware Tanzu. This is a newer offering that came out earlier this year, and the containerization and application modernization continues to be a focus of both VMware and our customer base. So as far as container orchestration goes, I think it's clear that Kubernetes really has solidified itself as the leader in this space, and it's been our focus to helping customers embark on that strategy and on that journey. So the VMware really offers this via the acquisition of Pivotal from a year or 2 ago, and through several other acquisitions that I'll also hit on. So some of the other components, so the virtual cloud network, this is a critical component to the strategy. This is really delivered by NSX as a focal point to it, where really NSX will provide that virtual network on premises, and then they have different technologies, the acquisition, so SD-WAN for extending out into remote offices, or for connecting users back to the actual data center. Or the digital workspace. So this is a critical component for end user access. This is really this particular franchise is made up of several different technologies, including Horizon, which is the virtual desktop aspect of the suite, and then Workspace ONE, which is really for identity management and also for presenting applications back to those end users. And the nice thing is the application presentation doesn't necessarily have to come from a Windows-specific device. It can also be presented, you can present SaaS applications and things like that through this digital workspace. And then intrinsic security. So the security aspect is really, the idea here is to layer security across all of the other 4 pillars. And they do that through technologies like Carbon Black, Secure State. NSX also falls into that intrinsic security area, especially as it relates to the network on premises, and also connecting that network into public cloud infrastructure. And then the first component we're going to kind of talk about here is the multi-cloud aspect. But first, let me just hit on some of these acquisitions. So acquisition-wise, you can take a look at this. VMware has made several acquisitions over the last 3 or so years in every one of the spaces. I mentioned the Pivotal Labs acquisition. That was a major acquisition for last year. I mean, that really put VMware as a front runner within the Kubernetes and cloud-native application space. And then if you look at some of the other acquisitions in that app modernization area, so things like Bitnami for application packaging, and Heptio, which was also a leader in developing Kubernetes orchestration, and then Wavefront, which is now Tanzu Observability, which for monitoring these cloud-native applications. And then if you just look across the stack, I won't kind of hit on all of these different technologies, but they have made acquisitions in every one of these spaces. Digital workspace may look a bit light, but if you look back, I mean, they acquired AirWatch and several other technologies to help bolster that particular portfolio of products. So I mentioned first we're going to hit on the multi-cloud area. And so many of our customers that we speak with are embarking on that digital transformation journey. And in order to deliver these more innovative solutions to drive greater business value faster, they need to quickly execute on these demands. And this has fueled a new way of application development that leverages infrastructure as code, where infrastructure components such as load balancers and routers and servers and containers are all spun up and down on demand based on the requirements of the application. Public cloud has been the main facilitator of these for these new applications due to its on-demand, real-time nature, and just how quickly they can offer new services to customers. However, effectively architecting, managing, and securing a cloud environment that meets the demands of yesterday's, today's, and tomorrow's application can be quite difficult. And refactoring an application to effectively consume these services can be time-consuming and costly. Many organizations are looking for more of a software-defined data center solution built on market-leading, proven technologies. And this is really where the VMware suite of products comes into play. So if we look at this particular layout here, on the top, we see it's important to have some form of cost optimization and operations optimization for that cloud infrastructure. You need to make sure that you're able to secure everything from the application access all the way down to where that data actually lives. There's been a number of impacts to organizations around data security recently, and it's important to make sure that you yourselves are securing your most important piece of your business. Application operations and analytics to make sure that these applications are performing as they're supposed to. Many customers are obviously building applications for both internal use and then also external customer access, and we need to make sure that those are operating with at optimal performance levels. And then provisioning and including things like automation in order to have faster time to value. Application development is operating very, very quickly and continues to increase in the speed that we need to provide new services and capabilities to our customers. And so it's important to include things like automation to improve that the actual time to value process. And then integrating with each of the different main public clouds is also important. So if we take a look at so some of the different services that are here, so we see AWS, we see Azure, we see GCP. It's important to have native integration as you're building these application workflows and application infrastructure workflows. So it's important to have native integration with each one of these tools so you can leverage things like function as a service with Azure Functions or Lambda within AWS, or have native integration with EC2 instances within AWS, or integration with GCP. And the VMware technology helps empower customers to do just that. And then at EchoStor, through our other partnerships with companies like Dell EMC and NetApp, we can help integrate the full stack of these applications and make sure that customers have rapid access to their data and that data is protected. So from a VMware, I'll just build this out just to hit on each of the different technologies. So most recently at VMworld, VMware introduced several different technologies that make up this cloud portfolio. Many of these technologies are listed here, but what's important to point out is just about all of these have multiple flavors now. So we have the cloud aspect, and really that's software as a service. So customers can now leverage things like vRealize Automation, vRealize Operations, Log Insight, and several other technologies as a software as a service, as opposed to having to deploy new infrastructure on premises. This provides VMware with the ability to very quickly offer new services for those technologies because customers no longer have to actually perform those upgrades themselves. But they do still have those on-premises versions. So if for customers that would prefer to have that environment on-premises, that's still an option. One of the really cool acquisitions most recently announced at VMworld was the vRealize AI Cloud. So this is to help customers as they increase their usage of VMware technology, the AI cloud provides machine learning technologies in order to better understand the infrastructure that's in use and how to optimize the performance and operation of that infrastructure. It's a very new product, and it's going to continue to be developed, but it's definitely going to help empower customers to leverage more of these technologies. Skyline support is another. So as you continue to use all these technologies, and you have vRealize AI Cloud that's helping to optimize the performance levels. There could still be bugs or issues that could come up, and Skyline support provides that direct line into VMware support to help improve the time to resolution for some of these issues that come up. And then you can see some of these the other technologies here. From a packaging standpoint, one of the new suites of products that was released was the vRealize Cloud Universal, and this is really a combination of the different vRealize Cloud products. So automation, operations, insight, AI, and Skyline is part of that, just to help customers leverage these technologies and build a more software-defined infrastructure. So it wouldn't be an update if we didn't hit on the flagship VMware product. So vSphere 7 Update 1 was recently released at VMworld, and this is a follow-up to the actual vSphere 7 announcement from April of this past year. But vSphere 7 Update 1 introduces significant scalability enhancements, as you can see here. Really, the intention is to allow customers to run monster-sized VMs on this virtual infrastructure. The compute resources and demands of these virtual machines continues to grow, and VMware is making sure that they can accommodate those uses. Some of the other important announcements, and some of these are kind of part of the original vSphere 7 announcement, but then also enhanced as part of the Update 1. But Lifecycle Manager, so this is essentially the replacement for Update Manager, and it's to provide a more clear upgrade path for the virtual infrastructure and more clear management of each of these different virtual infrastructure components to help customers patch and better manage that environment. The content library piece is actually important because this helps improve the VM templates and the usage of those templates. So now you have the ability to check in and check out templates in order to perform modifications to those templates, but also provide versioning. So you know the changes that were made and which version is relevant for a given, when you're trying to spin up a virtual machine from a template. Some of the other enhancements are around, so they made a Bitfusion acquisition previously, as I mentioned, as I kind of listed on the slide. I didn't actually mention it, but really that's to provide hardware acceleration and allow customers to have even faster application performance via direct access to the underlying hardware components. Intrinsic security continues to be a key focus of VMware, and again, that's across all of the different technologies, and it's no different with the vSphere 7 updates. And one of the most important enhancements was vSphere 7 with Kubernetes. So vSphere 7, when it was originally announced in April, included the ability to run containers alongside virtual machines on top of VMware Cloud Foundation. With Update 1, you can now run virtual machines and containers on those same environments without necessarily requiring Cloud Foundation, which has NSX. So now they can communicate directly with the distributed switch. So this just helps customers kind of get faster access to container infrastructure, especially if you're interested and you're trying to perform testing or provide new services to your end users. It's still suggested to use something like Cloud Foundation just because of the networking components and the automation that's built into that stack. But again, being able to run natively on vSphere 7 without having to add some of the additional infrastructure just provides that faster time to value. So for those that are interested in upgrading, it is important to evaluate your environment first. So VMware does have a vSphere assessment that you can run where you download the software. It will run in a collection against your vCenter server to better understand all of your current levels, both from a hardware standpoint and from a software standpoint. And this way we can just run an upgradability check against your environment to validate whether or not that version of vSphere is going to be supported. Obviously, CPUs come to mind first as new CPU generations come out with new instruction sets. Generally, the latest versions are going to require those newer CPUs. So if you're running some legacy CPUs, it's important to validate your upgradability. And if that's something you need help with, we can absolutely help out. I personally can help download and run the assessment within your environment and validate whether or not it makes sense for you to perform that upgrade to vSphere 7. So HCI has been a focus of VMware for several years now, and really vSAN has emerged as an industry-leading software-defined storage product. What's so appealing is a native integration with vSphere, which is able to provide unmatched stability and performance for the virtual infrastructure that's running on top of it. Most recently, VMware released the latest version of vSAN alongside vSphere, which is vSAN 7. Which provides the integration with vSphere Lifecycle Manager, as I mentioned before, and also introduced some of the native file services, so integration with NFS and SMB, and then also enhanced cloud-native storage. So, customers building cloud-native storage environments or just cloud-native applications, I should say, on internal infrastructure continues to increase, and having that storage layer to provide persistent storage to those cloud native applications is important. So just to quickly hit on the file services aspect. So as I mentioned, they did introduce support for NFS and SMB. NFS was originally announced with version 7, and then SMB came out with version 7 update 1. Along with Active Directory and Kerberos support. Full support for the things you'd expect out of a file environment with quotas and things like that to control user share sizes. And then from a cloud native standpoint, so one of the important things that was introduced previously was that cloud native storage control plane. And this is really how customers are able, or how VMware is able to offer customers the ability to run cloud-native applications on top of this vSAN environment. So full integration with things like vVols and snapshots and encryption for those, as intrinsic security continues to be of importance to customers, make sure we can lock down the entire stack. So I mentioned Skyline before, and as you continue to grow your virtual infrastructure, it's important to have direct access into the VMware support team. So VMware had introduced vSphere Health and vSAN Health previously. I want to say that was in 2019, just to help increase the supportability of those two products. But then they more recently announced the Skyline Advisor piece of it, which helps provide the cross-product support, so increasing the number of supports that are within the Skyline advisory, and provide just increased access into your environment through VMware support. So you can automate the actual log collections and just really shorten the time to resolution. For those that haven't necessarily deployed this within your environment, I strongly suggest you do. It is included to all customers from a vSphere and vSAN Health standpoint with any contract level. But then to production and premier customers for Skyline Advisor, and you can see the capabilities that are included there, and then premier customers for these additional components. So that's what I have from a multi-cloud standpoint. And now I'm going to pass it over to Daniel to hit on some of the application modernization areas.
Thanks, Matt. So I think we're going to move into some more of the modernized application environment, and feel free to obviously put questions into the Q&A. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about more theoretical, the theoretical side of application modernization, and so some of this will be familiar to many of you. But I think the first thing to hit on here is that there is a pressure mounting on these application modernization efforts. there are many customers out there talking about movement to the cloud and trying to move away from some of these kind of historic monolithic on-premise applications. And that seems to be a very similar pattern across our customers. One of the things that we have also observed with our customers is that this is similar to what happened when development organizations moved towards a more agile development methodology, and this concept of DevOps was born. We're seeing very similar pressures in this app modernization arena, because I don't think those underlying ways of developing applications has changed necessarily. And what we are seeing is that developers who are building these applications or trying to change their applications want a developer experience. What does that mean to them? That means checking in code, having continuous integration pipelines and delivery pipelines, build their code and deploy it for them. And that they feel that experience is heavily provided by cloud providers more often than it is from an infrastructure perspective, an on-premise infrastructure perspective. And so the pressure from the other direction would be the operator experience. So the more traditional infrastructure that still lives on-premise in many of our customers continues to be used. And the operators of that infrastructure over time have built very robust operations, and they need to be able to monitor these environments in a similar way as they do for these cloud environments. And that isn't always, those two things don't always match up. So that's where we see some of the pressure. What we do see is customers looking at automated platform operations, and that has very much become a much needed bridge between the developer experience and the operator's experience. And if anyone is involved in any kind of DevOps projects, they always start well, and then you start to run into issues around scaling. So scaling DevOps is ultimately to serve the developer and the operator experience, but it's very difficult to do that if you don't have kind of these platforms in place. And those platforms give developers what they want, which is API access and abstraction from underlying hardware. And for the operators, they want visibility and management capabilities to essentially scale and monitor the environment, even if it is up in a hyperscaler environment or on premise. There's things that still need to be done from an operations perspective. So, one of the things that VMware I think brings to the table here is, if you want to make progress towards application modernization, that there is a practical path and a platform that can be provided. So Matt, if you jump on to the next slide, a lot of people have seen this before, the R's of the application modernization journey. Increasing automation and feature velocity is the goal that you can see along the bottom here. But in order to reach that, you really need some different approaches because some apps will change or be refactored or rehosted, or one of the R's, better than others. So, VMware is providing a portfolio of products and a platform of products that can help you in no matter which one of these R's you're in. Up here, there's only 5. As we all know, there's the repurchase, which is the 6th R. But I think if you focus on the replatform side of things, VMware is really introducing an integrated stack of products that will allow you to kind of accelerate that replatforming effort, and essentially using the Tanzu portfolio and give you some of the developer and operator experience that you really need to do this effectively. So Matt, if you move to the next slide. So we can see here, this is more of an infrastructure approach. So, we're looking at this from a VMware perspective, from the infrastructure up. The journey is a little bit truncated here. If you're reading across the slide, it seems a bit easy to jump straight across the boxes here. But I think it's important, to look at existing infrastructure applications and apply some of that 5/6 R's to get a feel for what the developers are trying to do with their own applications. Much of the application modernization today is looking at containerization or the replatforming aspect of this. Replatforming applications refactoring applications is the kind of gold standard, if you will, to kind of build into a cloud native app. But that's very difficult and often time consuming to do. So it can also not be possible as well, because there may be reliance on old systems for data and other services like authentication. So making the application more nimble and able to run in more of a microservice type architecture, which is kind of looking at containers versus VMs, it is the place where I think a lot of certainly application developers will start, and that will obviously benefit the infrastructure folks as we look from the bottom up. Looking at your existing workloads, you can embrace Kubernetes and containers at scale, and provided you have the platforms available to you, you can both enable that kind of developer experience of self-service and the operator control. I think is a strong word, but governance around the environment, whether it is on premise or in the cloud. And it's very important to talk about containers, because it's even more of the cattle versus pets argument. VMs are becoming more like cattle. Well, containers are an even souped up version of that. Next slide, please, Matt. So here we can kind of see holistically the Tanzu portfolio. And, like I said, this is trying to bridge the gap and supply developers with API access and abstraction, and then also supply operators with visibility and management capabilities to scale environments. We're focusing, like I said, on the infrastructure side of things. So, we're going to talk less around the build service with some of the Spring runtime and Tanzu build services and those types of things. The Tanzu application service is part of that build, which is, looking at the developer perspective very much for committing code and having that automated build service. What we're going to focus on here is more of the run and manage pieces of the environment. And you can see here, there's a number of products which we'll focus on in the next slide. But really the key message here is that, VMware can support you across, this spectrum of application modernization, depending on which R you're focused on. And it does provide that gap. It does provide the bridge across the gap of the developer and operator experience. So Matt, if you could move to the next slide. So here you can see the run and manage portfolio specifically. We have, Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, which allows you to run the same Kubernetes environment across your on-premise and public cloud data centers. Use your existing hardware to, provision Kubernetes environments on premise. And again, it's about delivering the experience to the developer. So, they have the same experience they would have in a cloud environment, for example. With the announcement of vSphere 7 and Kubernetes that can run natively on vSphere 7, that's also making further use of your existing hardware potentially, and even running virtual machines and containers side by side, so that if you are in one of the more kind of retain type phases of your app modernization, you can develop and optimize those existing apps as they are, but then also support these newer services that some of the developers are expecting. From a managed perspective, there's two applications here. We have a Tanzu Mission Control and Tanzu Observability. Mission Control can be looked at as managing your clusters across cloud locations and on-premise, and doing it at scale. You're centralizing the policies and governance and security around your Kubernetes clusters, and essentially abstracting that away from your developer. Your developer just wants to deploy a cluster and get on with his development work. If he spends too much time worrying about how the infrastructure got deployed, the argument is that the developer's kind of wasting his development cycles, which is really his value, or his or her value, I should say, as part of the environment. Observability, this is a really important piece. Having a central place where you can have a monitoring as a service capability to create visibility, not just for the operators, but then also the developers, so that they can have feedback on their application deployments, on how their applications are running, and that will allow them to write better code and subsequently, have a much better application in the long run. And providing that, I think, is one of the core tenets of DevOps. But also on top of that, infrastructure engineers have been accustomed to running virtual machines and those types of things for a while, and they know what signs to look for, and they have observability through infrastructure tools. So having something like that's very much specific for containerization and cloud apps is very important. Matt, you can move on. So Matt mentioned VMware Cloud Foundation. This is a great platform, if you will, to start your software-defined data center journey on. It includes all of the compute, storage, and network you might need, and it specifically integrates very well with Tanzu. So standing up a Tanzu environment on top of VMware Cloud Foundation is very much a out-of-the-box automated experience with kind of complete management of the stack, including upgrades and all those types of things that you would have to worry about in the past. So VMware is definitely very much pushing this. It does require some things around vSAN, but once you have this management environment up and running, you can scale out to many different areas. Next slide, Matt. And again, this is touching on vSphere 7 with Tanzu Kubernetes on-premise. And as you can see here, this is native Kubernetes running on top of the ESX hypervisor, which allows you to stand up VMs and containers side by side. I think some of this is very much an evolution of the hypervisor, but having that Kubernetes grid service running as part of these containers is really going to help manage and maintain some of that as you go forward. If you thought VM sprawl was bad, think about container sprawl and trying to keep your hands around that. So next slide, Matt. So day two operations, mission control. This was one of the managed products we spoke about. Mission control, as I said, it's a centralized platform. It gives you consistency and across all of your environments. You can be on premise, you can be in the cloud, you can be multiple teams, multiple development teams. If you imagine every app might decide they want to deploy their own cluster, you can imagine what the management nightmares that might entail from a Kubernetes perspective. Mission control really provides that centralized view and capability so that you can make sure that you can scale with consistency and efficiency across all of these different environments. And it really it really does allow you to strengthen governance and security across your containerized applications as they kind of move further out of the data center. Next slide, Matt. So this is just an overview. I think it's very similar to last slide. I won't spend too much time on it. But you can see it does include capabilities to provision your own clusters, of course, which is what we've been mostly speaking about here with vSphere, AWS, Azure. But then, VMware is not trying to keep all of the kind of containerization aspects for themselves. They really are allowing you to apply this management across many other areas, OpenShift and some of these other containerized platforms. And then you can apply, all of your policies and capabilities across other already provisioned container environments. Next slide. So I think this is one of the areas that many people overlook when they work with containers. Having observability and monitoring capabilities across, many different areas of applications and clouds, frankly, is complex. And, we spoke earlier about infrastructure, and, infrastructure teams have spent years setting up their monitoring environments. But oftentimes that was all infrastructure oriented. Because now we're coming together with development and operations teams, we do need more of these tools available to us that may have been in silos before. APM tools, log tools, event tools, and checking tools all need to work together to get an effective picture of your application. So as we think of these, Matt, if you move along to the next slide, I'll kind of wrap up with some of the Tanzu observability capabilities here. That there is a lot of capabilities within this tool, but it really is focused on applications. And as you move down the kind of full stack of collections that it can run in, it is a SaaS-based product. So again, it's a platform that you can provide to your customers, if that's developers in this case, and really give you a central place. And over the years, everyone's had the single pane of glass idea, but this really does talk to modernized applications and how you can manage and maintain them going forward. I just want to, for the last minute, just throw out a couple of stats at you. Over half of the containers today run on Kubernetes, and nearly 90% of those are orchestrated. So that kind of gives you an idea of how important it is to really automate your container consumption. The majority of these, and this will sound very familiar to the infrastructure folks, the majority of these are underutilized from a CPU and memory perspective. 49% have less than 30% CPU usage. 45% have less than 30% memory usage. And these node sizes tend to increase with cluster size. So creating a huge cluster doesn't necessarily lead to efficient use of containers. And then lastly, this is really about automation. Think about this, the most popular version of Kubernetes is only 17 months old. So if you can imagine having to upgrade every single operating system in your environment 17 months or sooner, that's a huge undertaking. So really this orchestration is really important. So now I'm going to hand back to Matt because I have run over time, but feel free to reach out with questions or anything we can help you with.
Great, thank you, Daniel. All right, for the last few minutes here, we're just going to quickly hit on both the intrinsic security pieces and the strategy associated with intrinsic security, and then also digital workspace. If virtual networking and NSX are something you want to chat further about, we can absolutely do so. We didn't build it into this presentation only because an hour wasn't enough time. But again, if it's something you want to chat about, we absolutely can. So from a security perspective, really the idea is that VMware is trying to have a fully cohesive and intrinsic security posture across the entire software-defined data center environment and expanding out into the end user space. And make sure as part of that security package, there's complete analytics and ability to detect threats and prevent threats from even occurring. And this is across both from the endpoint down through the network and into even the end users themselves and identity management and things like that. And VMware does it through several different technologies. So from a desktop perspective, they do that really through Workspace ONE with zero trust endpoint security and the ability to control what the users access and who is accessing these applications. And moving over into the information security side, so this is really accomplished through Carbon Black and making sure that you can harden, prevent, and detect any threats that might be occurring within your particular workloads or on your endpoints. Kind of moving into the security aspect on the network side, making sure that you can control traffic, lock traffic down, provide segmentation, especially if you have multiple different application types and application teams that are accessing infrastructure sitting on the same physical infrastructure or in the same cloud environment. With NSX, we can provide that segmentation, place those distributed firewalls on those vSphere servers to prevent access and really lock them down, have a zero trust model. And then from an inspection standpoint, with things like vRealize Network Insight, we can inspect the traffic that's going through this environment to make sure that there's no unwanted traffic within. And then from a cloud standpoint, so obviously there's a number of different public clouds, and access to public clouds has never been easier. And users they kind of have free will to build the different instances within these public clouds however they'd like. And so sometimes they can kind of shy away from the governance and compliance components that you may have in place. So it's important to have technologies that monitor the governance and compliance associated with those clouds. And so VMware, via Cloud Health, and more specifically via Secure State, are able to accomplish that. So with Secure State providing real-time visibility across each of the different clouds, so GCP and Azure and AWS, as they all have their different services that might be available as these end users are building the applications. And again, establish compliance, so make sure that you're adhering to NIST compliance and things like that within your cloud environments. One of the recent announcements was Carbon Black Cloud Workload that was just released at VMworld. And this really takes the technology of Carbon Black and inserts it into the vSphere infrastructure. So from a preventing standpoint, you can stop any of those malware attacks from even happening via the Carbon Black software. It is agentless. I mean, there are things installed. It's marketed as an agentless technology, but it does help lock down the workloads that are running within your virtual infrastructure. And you can replace some of the legacy antivirus technologies that you may have been previously using, and just have a fully cohesive stack within your security within your virtual infrastructure for security. You can very quickly identify risks or threats that may actually make their way in, and evaluate that across the Carbon Black cloud. So you can take, if a threat does come in, Carbon Black is very quickly able to identify that particular risk. And you gain access directly within vCenter. So through the integration, you can get the workload inventory directly within vCenter. And then after you identified a particular risk, making sure that you're able to very quickly detect, respond, and remove that risk from your environment is important. And you can accomplish that with Carbon Black Cloud. So VMware does have a free trial that's going on now. I believe it's active until December 1st. And then if you do choose to take advantage of this technology, You get 6 months of free access to Carbon Black Cloud workloads. You can try it out in your environment and see if it might be a better fit than the current legacy antivirus technology you might be using. So then from a digital workspace standpoint, so any application from any device, anywhere, obviously is a very big tie to the actual workspace itself and how end users access these. And with the VMware Digital Workspace portfolio and Workspace ONE and AirWatch and Horizon, they're able to deliver on this. And this is more than just things like laptops, desktops, tablets, and smartphones. It's getting into more of the IoT space, so things like perhaps smartwatches or other devices. And just a quick side note from an IoT perspective, VMware did announce at VMworld something called Project Monterey, which is essentially reducing the ESXi size and allowing that to be run on smart NICs and other devices, offloading the ESXi workload from a given machine to allow that machine to run the application that it was developed to run. And then you can get access to these from any one of the various cloud offerings from a workspace perspective. The other piece is kind of where customers run these virtual desktops. So traditionally, many of these virtual desktops were run on premises as part of a VDI environment. But now a lot of customers, especially with what we find ourselves in today, where we had to very rapidly deploy workspaces for these end users to access. And so public clouds were a perfect location for that. In fact, with the VMware Horizon Cloud technology on Azure, customers were very quickly able to spin up Windows desktops for their remote users to log into and gain access to all of the various applications that might be required by the business. So as far as VMworld goes, there were several key announcements, one of which is the Intelligent Hub for the employee management piece. And this just provides faster, for instance, with onboarding. The Intelligent Hub provides much faster access to the different applications that a new user would be required to get into. So things like human resources and perhaps an intranet, things like that. You can very quickly provide access to those things and just increase the access to applications, especially if you have an internal user that changes jobs, you can change. It's completely role-based access, so you can change what applications that user has access to. And continue with IT modernization. I mentioned the cloud piece. That's a very important component to the Horizon suite. In fact, I'd imagine that the Horizon Cloud has been growing much faster, especially over this past year, than some of the other technologies. And then from a security standpoint, so with Workspace ONE and identity management, and then the integration with Carbon Black, VMware does continue to bolster the overall security posture for the end user space. And now we have 5 minutes left, and we did want to leave this last 5 minutes open for questions. So Nathan, were there any questions in the chat, or does anyone have questions they want to ask Daniel or myself?
I haven't seen anything coming in just yet, but we still do have a couple minutes, people, so feel free to shoot something in there.
Yeah, and if you prefer not to ask the question now, please feel free to reach out to your EchoStor account manager or myself or Daniel if you have our contact information. We'd be happy to answer whatever questions you have, schedule a follow-up discussion around any one of these technologies, and dive deeper into the specifics of how these technologies might help solve your requirement.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Matt and Daniel. I think this was really informative. I think everyone got a lot out of it. Like we said earlier, we did record the session, so we will be posting the session online and sending that out in an email. So feel free to share with your teams. If you don't have any contact information for EchoStor, you can always reply directly to that email, and we'll forward it along right to the right person. So thanks again to everybody, and we hope to talk to you guys soon.
All right. Thank you, everyone.